When neighbors in a Bronx apartment building heard screams echoing late at night, no one could have imagined what was happening behind the doors. A young woman's life was in danger, caught in a situation far more frightening than anyone realized. What unfolded over the next few days would leave the community reeling and raise questions no one could ignore. The building at 2295 Grand Concourse seemed ordinary to passersby, but inside, the ordinary became horrifying. Residents later admitted they had noticed arguments and disturbances before, but nothing prepared them for the reality of the situation. This wasn't just a fight or a momentary outburst. It was the start of a tragedy that would shock everyone connected to her. The victim was Princesa Encarnacion-Soto, a young woman full of promise and loved by her family, who had traveled from Rhode Island to New York with hopes of resolving personal matters. She was known for her optimism, her strong family ties, and the care she showed to those around her. Yet, even someone so cherished could find herself in grave danger, as this story would prove. What makes this case so compelling and unsettling is that the danger was hidden in plain sight. While neighbors went about their daily lives, a nightmare was unfolding inside the apartment. The people involved in this case, and the choices they made, would leave investigators, family, and the public asking, how could such violence take place without anyone stepping in? This case is not only shocking, but also deeply tragic. It forces us to confront difficult questions about safety, trust, and responsibility. And while the full story of what happened to Princesa will unfold over the course of this video, one thing is certain. Her life, her courage, and the heartbreak of her loss demand attention. This case is as shocking as it is heartbreaking. What would you have done if you heard screams from your neighbor's apartment? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the full truth about what happened to Princesa is far more shocking than you can imagine.
Details emerging in a murder investigation in the Bronx. Detectives looking for the boyfriend of a woman they say was stabbed and tortured for more than a week in Fordham. Investigators believe 21-year-old Princesa Encarnacion-Soto was tied to a bed, attacked with a hammer, and stabbed, and then thrown down a stairwell. Meanwhile, the boyfriend's mother is under arrest and facing murder charges. 54-year-old Naida Jorge was arrested after detectives noticed a trail of blood coming from her apartment. Once inside, they say they found a bag of bloody clothes.
Princesa Encarnacion-Soto was a young woman full of promise and warmth. Born and raised in Rhode Island, she maintained close ties with her mother, Jessie Soto, and her extended family in the Dominican Republic. Those who knew her remember her as kind, approachable, and deeply family-oriented, someone who valued her connections and worked to maintain them despite living away from home. She was also a devoted mother, cherishing her child above all else. Friends and family described her as nurturing and attentive, striving to provide love and stability in a life that was not always easy. Beyond her family, Princesa engaged with her friends and community with sincerity, building relationships through loyalty and care, and showing a natural optimism that made her presence memorable. Yet, her life was not without challenges. Her relationship with Robert Strother had been turbulent, marked by arguments, jealousy, and tension. Friends and family were concerned about the volatility of the relationship, though Princesa hoped for resolution and reconciliation. This troubled dynamic would soon become a central part of the tragedy that unfolded. Princesa's humanity, her love for her child, her closeness to her family, and her kindness to friends, sets the stage for understanding the gravity of what happened to her. She was a young woman whose life, full of promise and care for others, was cut short by circumstances rooted in a relationship that had grown dangerously toxic. Princesa Encarnacion-Soto met Robert Strother when she was 18 years old. Their relationship began as a typical young romance, filled with the excitement and intensity of first love. Friends recall that initially, Strother appeared charming and attentive, someone who seemed genuinely interested in her well-being. For a time, the relationship carried the energy and optimism common to couples of their age, shared laughs, long conversations, and dreams of a future together. However, over the next 3 years, the relationship developed cracks that gradually widened. Those close to Princesa began noticing episodes of tension and arguments that escalated beyond ordinary disagreements. There were instances of jealousy, controlling behavior, and disagreements that left her friends and family concerned. While these conflicts did not always escalate to physical violence initially, the emotional strain began to take its toll on her. Her mother and close friends frequently expressed worry over her involvement with Struther, sensing the volatility growing within the relationship. After 3 years together, the relationship ultimately ended. The breakup, though initially final, did not sever all contact. Struther and Princesa remained in intermittent communication, mostly through social media. According to investigators, Princesa occasionally engaged with him in an effort to resolve lingering issues, gain closure, or understand the emotional complexities of their shared past. Her intentions were not to rekindle the same patterns of abuse, but to find some measure of reconciliation or peace. In mid-July 2025, Princesa agreed to visit Struther at his Bronx apartment in Fordham Heights. Friends and family later reflected that she might have been seeking closure, hoping to address unfinished business from their relationship and perhaps rebuild some semblance of trust. Despite her optimism and care, those around her were deeply worried. They feared that Struther's behavior could escalate further, and some regretted not intervening or insisting she avoid contact with him altogether. The relationship, with its mixture of affection, volatility, and unresolved tension, was a key factor in the tragedy that followed. While Princesa's intentions were guided by hope, love, and the desire to resolve past differences, the history of instability and control set the stage for the violence she would ultimately face. Friends later described the heartbreak of realizing that her kindness and willingness to forgive may have placed her in harm's way. This history demonstrates a pattern familiar in many domestic violence cases. A combination of emotional attachment, intermittent communication, and hope for reconciliation can leave someone vulnerable, even when danger is apparent. Princesa's story reflects the complexity of these relationships, the mix of genuine affection, fear, and hope, and underscores the tragedy of a life cut short not by chance, but by the consequences of a relationship gone dangerously wrong. As we move forward in this story, it is essential to understand that the events leading to her death were not random. They were rooted in a relationship marked by past tension, jealousy, and control, culminating in a final meeting that would have devastating consequences. The final days of Princesa Encarnacion-Soto's life were marked by escalating danger, fear, and a tragic helplessness that those outside could scarcely imagine. On July 11, 2025, she traveled from Rhode Island to Fordham Heights, New York, to visit Robert Struther at his apartment at 2295 Grand Concourse. Friends later recounted that she had hoped this visit would provide closure or perhaps a chance to reconcile past differences. What seemed like a private meeting, intended to resolve lingering tensions, would quickly become a nightmare. Within days of her arrival, the situation turned dark. According to police reports, Struther allegedly restrained Princesa inside the apartment, using ropes to prevent her from leaving. Investigators later found evidence suggesting she endured repeated physical assaults, including being beaten with a hammer and slashed with knives. While exact details are harrowing, the overarching picture is one of a young woman trapped, powerless, and subjected to cruel treatment over multiple days. Neighbors later recalled hearing unusual sounds from the apartment, intermittent screaming, banging, and cries that went largely unheeded. One resident reportedly told police, "I heard her yelling a few times, but it didn't sound like anything permanent. I thought it was a fight, like normal arguments in the building." Another said, "There were noises, but we didn't know what was happening. I wish we had done something." These accounts underscore the chilling reality that the suffering occurred in plain sight, yet remained unnoticed or unreported in time to prevent it. The apartment itself, where Struther lived with his mother, Nida Jorge, became a site of confinement. Jorge reportedly assisted her son in concealing evidence and maintaining control over Princesa, further trapping her and preventing any chance of escape. Throughout the 8 days she was held, her mobility was restricted, and she had no opportunity to leave or seek help. Investigators later confirmed that the building had a history of domestic violence complaints, including calls previously made by Jorge herself regarding Strother. This context illustrates how systemic gaps and repeated warnings went unaddressed, leaving Princesa vulnerable. During this week, Princesa's hopes for reconciliation or resolution were met with the grim reality of captivity. The emotional tension, fear, and physical abuse compounded each day, creating an environment of dread that would culminate in her death. Despite her optimism and willingness to engage with Strother, the combination of prior volatility, controlling behavior, and the complicity of his mother made escape impossible. The tragedy of this period lies not only in the cruelty inflicted upon Princesa, but in the stark contrast between her vibrant life and the confined horror she endured in her final days. While neighbors went about their routines, a young woman's struggle for survival unfolded just walls away, unnoticed until it was too late. These final days reveal the danger of ignoring early warning signs and the devastating consequences of escalating abuse. As the week progressed toward July 22, 2025, the stage was set for the horrific discovery that would shock the building, the community, and her family. The combination of captivity, violence, and missed intervention created a tension that would finally explode into tragedy, leaving an indelible mark on all who knew her. On July 22, 2025, the terror that had unfolded behind closed doors finally came to light. Residents of 2295 Grand Concourse, the Bronx apartment building where Robert Strother lived with his mother, were confronted with a horrifying reality. Princesa Encarnacion-Soto's lifeless body had been discovered in the stairwell. The building, once filled with the ordinary sounds of daily life, became the epicenter of shock and grief. The scene was grim. Police reports confirm that Princesa had suffered multiple stab wounds and blunt force trauma, consistent with beatings from a hammer and slashing injuries from knives. Investigators also noted signs of mutilation and extensive evidence of torture, injuries that testified to the prolonged suffering she endured during the 8 days she was held captive. Despite the brutality, her identity was quickly confirmed, and her family was notified, sparking an immediate outpouring of grief. Neighbors described the discovery with disbelief. One resident reportedly told authorities, "I couldn't believe it was her, someone I saw in the building every now and then. Gone like that. It's not something you ever expect." Another recalled the fear and confusion that swept through the building, emphasizing the shock that such violence could occur in what had seemed like an ordinary community. The tragic contrast between Princesa's vibrant life and the horror of her final moments left many reeling. The police quickly began piecing together the events leading to the discovery. Surveillance and eyewitness reports highlighted the actions of Strother's mother, Nida Jorge, who had been seen carrying garbage bags containing bloody clothes and other items from the apartment. Jorge's involvement in covering up the crime intensified the gravity of the situation, underscoring how multiple people were complicit in concealing the suffering and death of Princesa. Community reaction was immediate and visceral. Residents expressed both shock and guilt, questioning whether they could have intervened sooner. The tragic reality that screams had been heard in the building days before raised haunting questions about the responsibilities of neighbors and the gaps in protection that allowed the crime to go unchecked. Advocacy organizations emphasized that Princesa's death was emblematic of broader systemic failures, calling for increased awareness, education, and rapid responses to domestic abuse. The discovery also set in motion a rapid law enforcement response. Police secured the scene, collected evidence, and launched a high-priority investigation. The crime shocked not only the Bronx community, but drew attention from the wider New York area, emphasizing the severity of the case and the urgent need for justice. Statements from authorities highlighted the brutality of the crime and the unthinkable nature of what Princesa endured, reinforcing the gravity of both the act and the failure of earlier interventions. This case left an entire community shaken. Do you think neighbors could have intervened sooner? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. The discovery of Princesa's body marked a turning point, the moment when her suffering was no longer hidden, and the full horror of the crime became undeniable. It also began the process of holding those responsible accountable, as law enforcement mobilized to apprehend Robert Strother and investigate the complicity of his mother. This moment of revelation is both heartbreaking and critical, serving as the bridge from the weeks of hidden abuse to the pursuit of justice that would follow. After the discovery of Princesa Encarnacion-Soto's body in the stairwell of 2295 Grand Concourse on July 22, 2025, the NYPD launched a high-priority homicide investigation. Detectives immediately recognized the brutality of the crime and the need to identify who could have committed such a prolonged and vicious act. From the outset, the investigation focused on Robert Strother, Princesa's former boyfriend, whose history with her and prior incidents in the building raised immediate suspicion. Crime scene technicians meticulously collected evidence from the apartment and surrounding areas. Blood-stained clothing, ropes, sheets, and other items used during her captivity were recovered, each piece meticulously documented for forensic analysis. Investigators determined that the blood patterns and physical evidence directly linked Strother to the assault and murder. Additionally, digital forensics uncovered communications between Strother and Princesa, confirming the timeline of her arrival in New York and the days she was held captive. These messages, combined with security footage from the building's entrances, placed Strother at the scene throughout the critical period. Eyewitness accounts further corroborated the timeline. Neighbors had reported seeing Nida Jorge, Strother's mother, carrying garbage bags filled with bloody clothes and other materials from the apartment. Police later determined that these actions were part of an effort to conceal the crime. According to investigators, Jorge not only disposed of evidence, but also assisted her son in changing Princesa's clothing and cleaning the apartment to obscure the brutality of the acts committed. This revelation shocked both law enforcement and the public, as it expanded the circle of culpability beyond the primary perpetrator. Detectives Catherine Capote, Ariel Laura, and Shirley Perez Romero led the interviews with neighbors, friends, and building residents, piecing together the timeline from July 11th, when Princesa arrived, to the discovery of her body on July 22nd. Statements from witnesses about screams, suspicious activity, and Jorge's behavior created a clear narrative of confinement, abuse, and cover-up. The investigators' work highlighted not only the physical evidence, but also the missed warning signs within the building, prior domestic violence complaints, shouting, and disturbances that had gone largely unaddressed. The arrests of Robert Strother and Nida Jorge were dramatic and unprecedented. Strother, 27, was apprehended near the Bronx apartment on August 1st, following a week-long manhunt. Jorge, 54, was also taken into custody in connection with the cover-up. Both were charged with multiple counts, including first-degree murder, manslaughter, kidnapping, criminal possession of a weapon, concealment of a human corpse, tampering with evidence, and hindering prosecution. During their arraignment before Bronx Supreme Court Justice Darlene Goldberg, both pleaded not guilty and were remanded to custody, pending further proceedings. The involvement of Strother's mother added a shocking and tragic dimension to the case. For the community, the revelation that a parent had assisted in concealing the murder of a young woman was deeply unsettling. Residents and the public expressed disbelief that a crime of such magnitude could be facilitated not only by the perpetrator, but also by someone who should have acted to prevent harm. Advocacy groups emphasized how this twist underscored the dangers of complicity and the devastating effects of enabling behavior, particularly in domestic violence situations. The forensic evidence, combined with digital communications and eyewitness testimony, created a compelling case against both suspects. Investigators highlighted that while the physical brutality of the crime was shocking, the deliberate attempts to erase evidence and obstruct justice demonstrated a calculated effort to prevent accountability. Strother's mother's participation was seen as an extension of the control and confinement that had already endangered Princesa's life during the week she was held captive. The investigation captured national attention, with media outlets covering both the violence inflicted upon Princesa and the unusual involvement of her boyfriend's mother. Authorities emphasized that their work was ongoing and that the arrests marked a critical step in holding the responsible parties accountable. The case also prompted discussion about systemic failures, highlighting the need for better follow-up on domestic violence complaints and more robust intervention strategies to protect vulnerable individuals. The arrest of both Strother and Jorge served as a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty, but also of the importance of meticulous investigative work. Each piece of evidence, each witness account, and each detail of the timeline brought clarity to a case that had begun in tragedy. As the legal process prepared to unfold, the community grappled with the shock of both the murder and the complicity that had allowed it to occur, setting the stage for justice to be pursued in the Bronx Supreme Court. Following their arrests, both Robert Strother and his mother, Nida Jorge, faced a series of serious charges in Bronx Supreme Court. The Bronx District Attorney's Office formally charged Strother, 27, and Jorge, 54, with 2 counts of first-degree murder, second-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter, first, and second-degree kidnapping, criminal possession of a weapon, concealment of a human corpse, tampering with physical evidence, and first-degree hindering prosecution. During their arraignment before Justice Darlene Goldberg, both pleaded not guilty and were remanded to custody pending trial. The legal proceedings have continued to unfold, with prosecution led by Assistant District Attorney Jonathan Vega of the Homicide Bureau. Investigators and digital forensic specialists have worked closely to build a detailed case, including evidence from social media communications, security footage, physical evidence collected at the crime scene, and witness testimony from neighbors. While the trial is ongoing, the indictment and arraignment have highlighted the severity of the crimes and the strong evidence against both suspects. The community response to Princesa's death and the court proceedings was immediate and heartfelt. Vigils were held in her memory, where friends, neighbors, and advocates gathered to honor her life and express collective grief. Residents of Fordham Heights spoke of the shock and sorrow that permeated their building and the wider neighborhood, emphasizing the contrast between the vibrant young woman they knew and the brutality of her final days. Advocacy groups, including the Freedom Youth Family Justice Center, called for increased awareness of domestic violence and better support systems for vulnerable individuals, using Princesa's case as a poignant example. Princesa's family, particularly her mother, Jessie Soto, has been vocal in expressing heartbreak over the loss. Statements shared with the media revealed a deep sense of grief and outrage, as well as frustration at the failures that allowed the abuse to escalate unchecked. Her mother's advocacy following the tragedy has highlighted the need for systemic reform and the importance of community vigilance in protecting at-risk individuals. Though Princesa did not have other children herself, the loss resonated deeply within her family network, leaving an enduring void. The ongoing legal proceedings serve not only to hold Strother and Jorge accountable, but also to underscore the broader implications of domestic violence cases. The careful documentation of evidence, witness statements, and forensic analysis is being used to ensure that justice is pursued methodically and transparently. The case remains active, with trial dates scheduled later in 2025, and the Bronx District Attorney's Office has emphasized that both defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty. For the community and for viewers, the aftermath of Princesa's murder is both tragic and instructive. The combination of prolonged abuse, missed intervention, and the shocking involvement of a family member in covering up the crime highlights how critical early action is. Vigils, advocacy campaigns, and public awareness initiatives have all sought to honor Princesa's memory while driving conversations about prevention and accountability. As the case continues through the legal system, the impact on her family and community remains profound. Her story is a stark reminder of the human cost of domestic violence and the importance of vigilance, both from loved ones and local authorities. The next step in this story, examining lessons and takeaways, will focus on how similar tragedies can be prevented, ensuring that Princesa's life and death inspire action and awareness beyond the courtroom. The tragic murder of Princesa Encarnacion-Soto is a sobering reminder of the dangers of domestic violence and the consequences of inaction. Her story highlights how abuse can escalate behind closed doors, even in communities that seem ordinary and familiar. It underscores the critical role that friends, neighbors, and local authorities play in recognizing and responding to danger before it becomes fatal. Several key lessons emerge from this case. First, early intervention is vital. Chronic arguments, jealousy, controlling behavior, or any form of physical aggression should be taken seriously. While no one can predict every outcome, being alert to warning signs and acting promptly can save lives. Second, community vigilance matters. Hearing screams, witnessing unusual behavior, or suspecting abuse should prompt immediate action. Calling authorities or seeking support from advocacy organizations can prevent further harm. Third, supporting potential victims is essential. Providing resources, staying in contact, and helping victims access safe spaces can create pathways to escape abusive situations before they escalate. Princesa's story also emphasizes systemic responsibility. Repeated complaints or calls about violence, if left unaddressed, allow danger to persist. Strengthening communication, intervention strategies, and outreach within communities can make a profound difference. While her death is heartbreaking, her legacy can inspire change. By staying vigilant, speaking out, and offering support, communities can prevent similar tragedies and honor the memory of victims like Princesa. What do you think is the best way to prevent cases like this? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more cases that shed light on justice and prevention.